Okay, just to repeat before we formally start that we have English and French interpretation available, and you can choose it on the lower end of the screen of the Zoom program if you click on the little globe. And I think with this, ladies and gentlemen, good morning, good afternoon, good evening. I'm very happy to welcome to our series of online workshops on education for sustainable development. The big combination ESD and the world beyond COVID, which is our first workshop. My name is Alexander Leicht. I work at Unesco for Education for Sustainable Development. I will moderate this 1-hour session with a number of distinguished panelists. And in order to open our session today, I'm very happy to give the floor to Ms. Vibeke Jensen, who is the Director of the Division for Peace and Education for Sustainable Development at UNESCO. You have the floor.
Thank you very much, Alexander, and it's a pleasure to be here. Professor Maria Böhmer, President of the German National Commission, distinguished speakers, participants, it's indeed a great pleasure and honor for me to welcome you all to this first edition of the online workshop series on the transformative power of education for sustainable development for the world beyond COVID-19. The COVID-19 pandemic had a tragic impact on human life around the world. It has challenged the structures of our societies and our ways of life. But at the same time, this disruption also presents a historic chance to redesign our societies and decide to go in new directions. While we have to ensure that learning continues, we need to reflect on what we should learn and how we learn best to build a sustainable future. Under the title, The Big Conversation, Education for Sustainable Development and the World Beyond COVID-19, today's workshop will start a 7-month-long conversation through a series of workshops leading up to the UNESCO World Conference on Education for Sustainable Development, which will take place next May in Berlin, Germany. And we need to ask the big fundamental questions on what kind of world do we want to live in beyond COVID-19? And what is necessary to rebuild and recover in a more sustainable and equitable way? Achieving sustainable development requires a change in the way we think, act, and consequently a transition to sustainable lifestyles, consumption, and production patterns. Only education and learning at all levels and in all social contexts can bring about this critical change. Therefore, the question on the role of education, and particularly ESD, to promote the sustainable transformation needed should be addressed in this series. The new global framework for ESD for 2030, which will be formally launched globally at UNESCO World Conference in May 2021, as said in Berlin and Germany, seeks to further strengthen the contribution of ESD to all 17 Sustainable Development Goals. Building on ESD's work in equipping learners with knowledge, awareness, and action for sustainability, ESD for 2030 will place particular emphasis on the importance of individual and societal transformation for sustainability and the contribution of education to the survival and prosperity of humanity. I strongly believe that education is the one powerful tool we have to invest in to reach lasting change. The effects cannot be seen immediately, but in the long term. It will be the main driver for a sustainable future, cross-cutting through all 17 SDGs. And let us not miss this opportunity to have a lasting positive impact on learners worldwide and the one planet that we share. I wish to thank you all participants across the world for joining this workshop and hope that discussions will inspire your work as multipliers throughout the next 10 years in the framework of ESD for 2030. Because despite the many hurdles, now is time for action and change. I wish to take this opportunity again to thank the German Federal Ministry of Education and Research for the generous contribution and partnership in organizing the series of workshops. And I would also like to extend my gratitude to Professor Maria Böhmer and the German National Commission for the strong and continuous support. So thank you, and I hope you will all enjoy the conversation this afternoon. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Ms. Jensen. Thank you very much, Vibeke, for your opening remarks. We are organizing this workshop and, in fact, a series together with our German partners, with we also organize the ESD World Conference next year. So Ms. Jensen's opening will be followed by a welcome message from the President of the German Commission for UNESCO, Professor Maria Böhmer, and I invite the welcome message now.
Dear Assistant Director General, dear colleagues and speakers, dear participants, on behalf of the German Commission for UNESCO, I'm delighted to welcome you to this online workshop series on ESD and COVID-19. I also extend a warm welcome to all of you on behalf of the German Federal Ministry of Education and Research, who asked me to jointly represent the German partners this morning. I want to thank UNESCO and the Federal Ministry for the continued and very successful collaboration in preparation of the UNESCO World Conference on Education for Sustainable Development in Berlin next year. It will officially launch the new UNESCO framework ESD for 2030. We strongly believe that ESD is more relevant than ever. We are concerned that the global shock induced by COVID-19 might delay efforts to promote ESD. In particular, with large numbers of both formal and informal learning spaces being closed or restricted, we need to adapt quickly to ensure that the impact of ESD is not diminished. It is on us to use this historic moment to strengthen our messages around ESD, and we are convinced that ESD for 2030 will provide us with the opportunity to do so. I would like to take this opportunity also to congratulate UNESCO on developing this excellent new framework, ESD for 2030. In visionary ways, this new framework anticipated many of the key challenges becoming even more apparent through the pandemic. We therefore second the Assistant Director General highlighting the critical importance of ESD in times of crisis. The transformative power of ESD will allow us, both institutions and learners, to actively shape a future that is built on a more sustainable and just world. The transformative power lies in creating empathic learners with critical thinking skills. Together, those both two qualities lead to the empowerment needed for action. We need to urgently put young people in the center of this transformation. We need to give them the opportunity to actively contribute to rebuilding more resilient systems. The National Platform on ESD in Germany has recently adopted a resolution on ESD and Corona. This resolution was initiated and coordinated by the National Youth Panel for ESD. This is just one example of how we continuously work towards engaging young people in decision-making processes. In this way, we enable them to drive ESD implementation forward. We need to ask ourselves how we want to live and which priorities we want to put forward. The pandemic has shown that we need to build strong communities, promote solidarity both locally and globally, and foster a high tolerance for ambiguity. We strive to further promote these values. We strongly believe that ESD will help us achieve this goal together. I look forward to seeing you either virtually or in person in Berlin next year. Enjoy this first and the coming workshop. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much for this welcome message from Professor Maria Böhmer, President of the German Mission for UNESCO. And again, thank you to our German partners for co-organizing this workshop, which, as has been explained, is part of a series where we want to discuss and raise questions that are relevant to sustainability, to education for sustainability, and for human planetary well-being overall. Questions such as, what world do we want to live in beyond COVID-19? Questions such as, how do we get to the world? And thirdly, what role does education have to play in this whole effort? I'm very happy to be joined by a series of very distinguished speakers, and I will briefly introduce them here. We have Satish Kumar, a long-standing peace and environmental activist and the previous editor of Research and Psychologist Medicine magazine, and the founder of Schumacher College. We have Professor Zul Abdul Razak, the rector of the International Islamic University of Malaysia. We have Katsucho Hori, a student, a climate activist and member of Climate Youth Japan. And we have Ms. Maya Göpel, Secretary General of the German Advisory Council on Global Change. I'm very happy that you have joined us today for your inputs. This first session of the series of workshops, this first 1 hour session of the series of workshops, is really about raising questions. And I invite all the participants that are following online to raise their question through the Q&A function in the Zoom program. And whichever question we are not able to respond to today, we will try to address in the course of the workshop series, which will run into next year. And with this brief explanation, I would really like to very, very warmly welcome our keynote speaker today, Satish Kumar, who has spent many years inspired by, coming originally from India, inspired by Mahatma Gandhi to promote peace and sustainable development and environmental awareness across the world. Now based in the UK, we're very pleased and honored that you're able to join us today. And we're very much looking forward to your remarks on the big picture. What does the pandemic mean for us and for our educational efforts? Satish, please, I give you the floor.
Thank you very much for your warm welcome. And I would like to congratulate UNESCO and particularly the German wing of UNESCO and the federal government of Germany for sponsoring this wonderful event to talk about post-COVID sustainable education development. Now, for me, COVID-19 is a cry from the earth. It is a voice of the earth. Somehow, human-nature relationship in the past century or even more than century, 200 years, has not been very healthy and very strong. Somehow, in our educational system, we have come to believe that nature is out there separate from humans. The mountains, the animals, the oceans, the forests, and the birds, the wildlife are nature, and humans are separate from nature. In post-COVID-19, the sustainable education needs to change this worldview. We need to educate our young people in schools, colleges, and universities that nature and humans are not separate. We are nature. And because we are nature, what we do to nature out there, we are doing nature to in here, to ourselves. We are made of the same elements as everything: earth, air, fire, water. We are made of those basic elements. And animals, forests, mountains, everything All nature is made of those basic elements. So the first and foremost transformation I would like in our universities and colleges to make the education sustainable and education for sustainability, I would like to change this worldview. And I would like to say that new post-COVID-19 worldview educational system should be that humans and nature are one. We are connected, we are interdependent, there's no separation, there's no disconnection. And the moment we change that worldview, then we will see that nature is not simply a resource for the economy. At the moment, our education system teaching us, young people especially, but everybody, that nature is a resource for the economy. So the forests are there for human beings, for our economic growth. And the land and animals are there for our economic growth. So we are using nature as a resource for the economy. I want to change that. I want the education for sustainability to think that nature is not merely a resource for the economy. Nature is a source of life itself. As we are nature. Nature means to be born, birth. We are all born. So nature is the source of life, or nature is life itself. So this changes the means and ends. At the moment, production and consumption had become the end goal of our civilization. We think that economic growth and more production, more consumption is the goal. And the nature and humans are instruments to make more production and more consumption and more economic growth. So humans and nature have been turned into instruments. Humans and nature have been turned into means to the end of economic growth and production and consumption. That must change. And this is a confusion of means and ends. The end should be protection and well-being of planet Earth, our precious and glorious planet Earth, and well-being and happiness of human community, and the production, consumption, economy, profit, business, all this should be the means to an end. So this confusion of means and end must change if we want to make education for sustainability. This is the most fundamental transformation of our mindset, a most fundamental transformation of our worldview. This is a new civilization, new culture, new paradigm thinking that we have to adopt. The moment we change that, then nature is not only there for human benefit. Nature has intrinsic value. Nature is good. Forests are good not because they are useful to humans, but forests are good in themselves. We all talk about human rights. That is wonderful. We all believe in human rights. We must respect and we must kind of honor human rights, but also we have to accept the rights of nature. The forests have rights. The oceans have rights. We have no right to pollute our oceans with plastic, more plastic, and more plastic. Our oceans are full of plastic. Our land is poisoned. Our forests are being cut down more and more. So the reason we have this coronavirus and COVID-19 is because humans have been encroaching more and more and more wild land, and biodiversity biodiversity is being destroyed, and the wildlife is being destroyed. And we are bringing more and more monoculture, mass production of agriculture, soya beans and other things. And we are cutting down rainforest and many other wild places. So we need to live within our means. We need to live elegantly, simple life, good life, beautiful life, happy life, abundant life, but no waste, no pollution. This is the motto of sustainable education, that humanity should not produce any waste and any pollution. Like in nature, there is no waste. In nature, there is no pollution. And we are nature. Why we humans have created this idea of pollution and waste and degradation of our environment. So economy should be cyclical. As in nature, everything is cyclical. Nature grows and grows. At the moment, we have apple season, and this apple season is giving us thousands and thousands of apples every tree is producing. So there's a growth in nature. There's a growth, but that growth is without waste and without pollution. All apples can be eaten or can go back to earth, back to nature, and can become soil. And so we have to create a new economy which is not linear, that you take from nature, use it and throw it away as a waste and pollution, like we are doing carbon emission in the climate and creating climate change and global warming. If we have a cyclical economy, then everything we take from nature, we use it for our satisfaction, for our fulfillment, our good clothes, good food, good housing, good everything. But then it should go back to nature, and nature can renew itself, revive itself, rejuvenate itself. So the nature should be nurtured and rejuvenated with human activity, and not diminished and not polluted and not wasted. And the biodiversity and wildlife should not be diminished. These are the fundamental principles of sustainable education. And if we can adopt these fundamental principles, then I think we will have learned a good lesson from this COVID-19, which has been the voice of the earth. And the earth is saying the human-nature relationship has to be more harmonious and not a relationship of exploitation and subjugation. Humans are not here to conquer nature. Humans are here to care for nature. And the old idea, the old educational system has been teaching us to conquer nature, subjugate nature, and make nature our slave. Nature is not our slave. We are nature, and nature is our friend, and nature our family. All the birds in the sky, all the animals in the forest, all the fish and sea life in the oceans, they're all our family members. We are one earth community, and this is our common home. Planet home is our common home. This is what we need to teach our young people, that we live in this one common home and we must take care of it. If we can bring these ideas into education, I think our education can be for sustainability. So these few words I am giving you, and we are running Schumacher College with these principles. So if you would like to take more interest in this, you are welcome to look at Schumacher College website, and you are welcome to attend some of our courses to go deeper into the Gaia theory, the deep ecology theory, the unity of life theory. These things are pertinent. So we are providing at Schumacher College education of head, education of hearts, education of hands, holistic education. So sustainability is about holistic thinking. So education for sustainability has to be holistic. These are my few words to you, and I would like to say I'm honored and delighted to be part of this great UNESCO webinar on sustainable education post-COVID. And so thank you for inviting me, and thank you for giving me this opportunity to say a few words. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Satish. Thank you so much for your very, very powerful views and remarks on the current situation, and also for giving us a vision of where we could go with education, so that education does not exacerbate problems, but really is part of the solution. Thank you very much indeed for your remarks. I move on to Professor Zul Razak, who is Director of the International Islamic University of Malaysia, and also the immediate past president of the International Association of Universities, one of the largest university networks across the world. And he is also one of very long-standing promoters of education for sustainable development. We're very, very happy to have you here with us today, and you will share your comments coming from issue of a ways of life and lifestyle perspective. Zul, I invite you to take the floor.
Thank you very much, Alexander, and thank you very much for also giving me this opportunity to say some words about what we're facing today. And I would like to also congratulate Mr. Kumar for giving such an inspiring keynote, and I remain speechless listening to what you have said. Now, quite clearly, I think as far as we are concerned, looking at lifestyle are basically shaped by the kind of education, the kind of training that we got in schools or personally or otherwise outside school. And these are the ones that is shaping our lifestyle today. And as Mr. Kumar has said, why we end up in the way we are, basically that's a kind of lifestyle that has been promoted based on production, based on consumption, based on exploitation, based on ownership. And all these are the new values, quote unquote, as I see it, because we used to live at a very simple life. We used to live in a very humble life where we think that human being and nature is part and parcel of one and the same. When we talk about new normal, for example, I think it is not new, it is a renewed normal. It is an experience that we have gone through for many ages. We have seen many things that's happening before this. When you talk about the Holocene era, for example, it is an era that we perhaps live better than what we are living now in the Anthropocene era. And therefore, when we talk about lifestyle, I think we need to go back to where we used to be and to relearn what we have had through the generations before us. And this, I come from the vision of values. I am very fortunate to be involved in the two-day symposium. And I think the overwhelming views that I think I hear is basically, let's bring back the values. The values, us as human beings, the values that we can live together with nature, symbiotically benefiting from one another. And these are the values that I think we need to integrate it back into education as part and parcel of the education for lifelong learning, education for sustainable development, and education for the future. Until and unless we can bring back values of this nature into the education system, then I think there is no way we're going to fight the coronavirus. As Mr. Kumar talked about, we are conquering nature. Now it looks as though that nature is conquering us. All of us remain locked down. All of us remain almost paralyzed. We cannot live on the consumption and the production that we've built for so long because it is not the natural way of living as far as the COVID virus is concerned. And therefore, I would like to go back to the whole idea of trying to protect human being, and from the point of view of life, from the point of view of its intellectual thinking, from the point of view of building a lineage or a future generation that is to come that will inherit the earth, the way sustainable development has phrased it, the way we use resources, and also the way we dignify ourselves as human beings, part and parcel of nature, the wisest, as it were, called the Homo sapiens. We have lost of this, and I think we need to bring back all these at least 5 principles. We need to talk about what nature, what values that we need to bring, the values of life protection, the values of our intellectual, how do you protect it, the values of protecting the younger generation who are now voicing concern of what their future looks like and how do you dignify life as we go along. I think these are the values that I think have been associated for us for a long time. It is a value that has been remained tried and tested. It is nothing that we can doubt about because for a long time, this value has sustained life. And even when we see disruption, I mean, when I talk about Aceh, when we talk about Fukushima, we bounce back on these very same values. We are resilient because we still have these values with us. And therefore, I think these values need to come back into our education system, be it formal, be it informal, and so on and so forth. From the little work that we have done, in many cultures around the world, these values remain pristine. When we talk about Japan, I learned about the values of Kizuna, the values of Ikigai. When we talk about Sweden, the values of Lagom. When we went to Bali, the values of Trikina Harana. These are values that has been there. And in my own society, we talk about values of Sejahtera. But they are nowhere to be seen because they are not quote unquote marketable. They are not quote unquote economically viable, as it were, and therefore they are just shift to a side. In our case, in Malaysia, the national education philosophy is built on these values of Sejahtera. We've got the word called Sejahtera Diri, and this is the end product of education. The confusion that Mr. Kumar talked about does not exist in our philosophy, but implementation of that philosophy, being sidelined, being marginalized, and be pushed by sometime by the marketplace, that we now begin to look at different ways of making our education work. So I would like to come back to this whole idea, let's revisit the past, Let's see what we can salvage from the past. And the past is still well represented in many parts of the world when we talk about the indigenous population. These are the population that's been living very much in the sense of sustainable development. As we interact with them, we found that they are living in a much peaceful and much sustainable way compared to we, quote unquote, in the civilized world. And I think we need to revisit them. We need to bring them back into the mainstream and relearn from them what we have forgotten for a long time, and then become integrated with nature once again. I would like to end by saying that lifestyle, as far as I understand it, is an aggregation of life, experiences, and also relationship. And these, again, the three words that I hear often in the last two symposiums: where is the relationship, where is the experience, and where is the aspiration to move forward to save human being, not just one cohort of people or a group of people or a nation, but the whole human being, as it is metaphor in our planet, the one planet that we only have and the one planet that we need to save so that our survival can also be with that. Yeah. Last but not least, on this view, I think we need to talk about the value that has gone wrong or missing altogether, and it's about trust and trustworthiness. I think these values that we talked about are all based on trust and trustworthiness. If you don't have trust, then I think we see what we see today. People are questioning the very assumptions about human being and nature. We are talking about fake news and all those things that have been imported in because we do not have trust, because we have lost the trust somehow or other. And we need to build this trust again, because that's the bedrock of our living together in solidarity, our living together in creating civilization, and our living together to ensure that the survival of this planet Earth and us as a human person live together in harmony. So on that note, I would like to thank very much the organization for taking this initiative. And I'm very happy that we are talking about the language that we need to talk maybe some years ago. But thankfully, COVID is here to remind us, if we neglect this opportunity, we probably will not have another opportunity to move forward. I'm optimistic that we're working together, we will come to a solution if we come back to our sanity as far as human being, nature, culture, and values is concerned. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Professor Zul, for your wonderful remarks, reminding us of values that in fact exist and that we all do share, but that are often so imperfectly and little implemented. Thank you very much for your remarks. I will move on to Katsucho Hori from Japan, who is a student and climate activist and part of the climate youth activist movement in Japan. And I will invite you to give us your comments, your remarks, your observations about the current situation, in particular, of course, focusing on the issue of climate change. Katsutoshi, you have the floor.
Thank you, Alexander, and everyone. So it's really an honor to be here. And my name is Katsucho Hori from Japan. The incredible event which occurred last year was COVID-19, and this sudden crisis has huge impact on the world. But we also have a crisis that we've been working for a long time. Today, I will speak about the climate crisis. When I was an elementary school student, I did a free research project and came across a book about environmental issues. I learned that global warming will threaten our lives. But I couldn't help but wonder what was adults were doing about it. I believe that the Kyoto Protocol, adopted at the time of my birth year, was leading the world to solve global warming. However, my hope was broken in the worst way. 2 years ago, my hometown, Okayama, made a big news across Japan. Extreme weather caused flood there. In the end, my friends' houses were washed away, and my school became an evacuation area. According to one study, I learned that it could not have happened without the effect of the global warming. We lost important things because we didn't tackle what was expected to happen. Why have we ignored such a huge crisis? There's nothing more foolish than to lose something and then realize how precious it was. Of course, we know that some governments are working on this, but none of them are doing enough. IPCC reports that temperature could rise by 1.5 degrees Celsius over the next decade compared to pre-industrial level, and the world will suffer from catastrophic damage. When I talk to some policy about the shifting to the renewable energy, they just gave reasons why they couldn't and didn't make an ambitious effort. In the COP, I also saw some diplomats putting their country's position and interest and not cooperating with climate change solutions. I would like you to think about what we must do done in this urgent situation, not what we can do. We must think about how we talk constructively and take steps to address these global issues. I also have to mention about the misinterruption that climate change has been improved by COVID-19. Some news report air pollution and carbon dioxide emissions have been suppressed due to the crisis. But I think this is a big misleading because this fact does not show any solutions to climate change. Even if the emission is reduced, its effect is insignificant, and global warming will not stop in just 1 year. And most importantly, human beings do not want the isolated lifestyles. I think that COVID-19 is also an alert from nature to us, same as climate change. Both problems were provoked by careless and excessive human beings' activities. Also, they are closely related. As global warming is processing, viruses will become more active and spread their habitats. This is why we must confront the infections and climate change together. I clearly remember my teacher telling me that your generation is going to have a tough time, so good luck. But young people don't ask for this empty encouragement. We have to realize that this society puts all the burden on voiceless future generations who have no choice in what kind of planet to live. I also would like you to know that we are the last generation to have a choice to save the planet and must face up to this responsibility. Over the next decade, I'm really worried that the world become much more devastated. But if we want to find hope in this world, what we need is our ethics and responsibility for the future. UNESCO also must continue to exist as a symbol of people's fortress of peace. I hope this conference becomes a start to show that cooperation for the peace together. Thank you.
Great, thank you very much, Katsucho, for your very, very powerful remarks based on partly on your own experience and on your tireless efforts to address climate change and to mobilize against climate change. Thank you very much indeed. I'll move on to Ms. Maya Göpp, the Secretary General of the German Advisory Council on Global Change. Very happy to have you here with us as a key expert, talking about building resilience, but also going much beyond. We're very happy to give you the floor, Ms. Göpp.
Yes, hi, thank you very much. I don't know if someone's sharing my screen right now. Because that would need to stop because my notes are somewhere underneath.
Okay, just hold on for a second. We're trying to solve that.
Okay.
Okay, I don't see a way, my colleagues don't seem to find a way to stop that.
Fine. I think I've got it.
Okay, yeah, thank you. So please go ahead.
Yeah, no, I'm sorry for that. I just pulled everything up the moment you kind of put me onto speaking slow. I had to find my way out. No, I think what I would really like to do is to offer a totally northern Western point of view, and especially out of the country of Germany, that has weathered this crisis rather well in comparison to its impact on people and society, whilst trying to make the connections to what Satish, Kumar and others have said, because I do feel that we did have a difficulty when we think about promoting sustainability and especially political changes for sustainability to get people into understanding why that was not basically sacrificing what they had before, but a revisiting of who we actually are. And this is what I really, really appreciated, Satish, in the way that you presented it. And I've been trying to put this forward a lot, that Corona and the coronavirus has interrupted a lot of our routines. They keep us frantic and push us through the days to discover again our biological existence. Because it was this close connection between degradation of ecosystems that makes viruses jump onto human beings, and then to understand how vulnerable we are because of being a biological beings, and how much the emphasis on what is really important in our societies and who is doing the really important jobs in our societies has completely shifted, because formerly we were just frantic about digitalization and finance, which was really what a progress and an innovation agenda was all about. And this moment was giving us an opportunity to reconsider those priorities and to reconsider exactly, Satish, as you said, what are means and what are higher ends, and what are the basic fundamentals on which delivering on those higher ends is actually dependent. So this is why I grouped it a little bit in 5 pieces. And I think this notion of worldview, how can we really use this opportunity also to see things a bit more systemically? Obviously, we had a few people that were just angry at others when the shopping shelves were empty. They just looked at everybody else as a virus carrier that could threaten themselves. You did have that reaction as well, but many, many were coming much closer to seeing the world systemically. So why is the shelf in the supermarket empty? Because supply chains have been set up in a way that the moment that migrant workers are not participating in the harvest in Germany, because they're not able to enter the country, they're breaking down. Who is involved in actually delivering all that food for us? How are they being compensated? We had big scandals in the meat production industry because Corona spread there viciously because the working conditions are so bad. And it is a lot of migrant workers from Eastern Europe that are doing that for an amount of money that no German would ever go working for. So it did kind of really surface in a very tangible way and visible way a lot of the things that we said are not sustainable in the existing system that we got so used to calling normal or the reality, and the past dependencies that seem to be not changeable. This interrupting of those past dependencies was politically not feasible. And so a lot of what people that are contacting me are saying, this has been the proof that a lot is possible if the political will is there. And at the same time, we still, obviously now, with people staying at home, demonstrations not being allowed, etc., are feeling a bit like they're on the receiving end of decisions on the government side about how to deal with this. What is going to be the investments of the amount of money that we're taking? And you see quite a lot of polarization about this notion of, we see this crisis as a possibility for more sustainability. And a lot of people are saying, unless their job is being, like the people working in cultural productions or in arts, they obviously have been hit hardest because they don't really get anything that we call Kurzarbeit, which is the compensation scheme for a lot of other people in fixed employment. They can stay at home and get 67% of their former wages subsidized by the government. But those that are falling through those cracks, they feel a low threat, but others are reporting that they actually like having more time. They actually like being more at home. They actually enjoyed having those walks outside, which was a kind of compensatory measure from staying inside so much. Once the housing was more or less big enough, being with the family wasn't so bad. So it really, really brought a lot of awareness about under which conditions do we feel well, And how much is that not tied with massive consumption? And so why economists are still calculating, oh, as soon as everything's opening up and we have to stimulate consumption and people have now all these savings and they'll pump them out into consuming, there's a feeling of continued risk that is not going to guarantee that demand, a lot of spending of consumers will pick up again, because they still don't want to go flying, they still don't want to go on cruise ships, and they can't eat 24 hours in a restaurant to kind of compensate for all the meals they've missed out on. So the whole economics is kind of breaking apart, with which we can anticipate what is going to be consumer behavior, and thus where our business is going to pick up beyond the everyday needs, obviously. And then some more luxurious goods that people finally had time to actually shop and go about. But so the whole causality assumptions that we had on our economy have been challenged. And it does mean that we have to much more empirically look at what's possible right now, and how do we make sure that the means taken, especially with public money, are going to serve protecting the most vulnerable, and are going to serve to transform those supply chains, to transform, making them into something more resilient. And this is obviously the kind of subject that was put forward for my conclusion. So this compass, to be really clear, what is the priority sectors, but also the priority investments, in order for us to guide through a stormy weathered future, because we don't know yet when anything that you can plan reliably is going to pick up again. And have a very clear view that not all countries, I mean, Europe being very tightly connected, it's a big discussion now how different recovery will be in the different countries, and how some people will be impacted much more than others. And we're not very good at looking at the global south and other places where people are just hit directly because government can't even afford to bring out this money. And we have very little discourse. I find it very shameful about other ideas that are being brought forward about or UNDP putting out an idea about a basic income that could be financed through debt cancellations for the poorest 3 billion in the world, or the IMF could be allowing for special drawing rights. All of this really does not have much of a place in our discussions here. And this is something I find embarrassing from this point of view. But we do have a lot of discussions about protests. And since the polarization, that's my last point, has been mentioned, I think from educators and communicators, understanding what is the fear that leads to the polarization arguments is exactly where we need to go. And this is why I think the frameworks, and I've been promoting this a lot, because now everyone says, oh, the digitalization of our schools has to be even faster. We've seen this now. People have to be able to learn at home, and students have to be taught at home. It's like, what are they being taught? And how is this embedded in the wider notion of what are the skills and the values and the possibilities to work with different perspectives, the possibilities to understand a different point of view, not get into hostility, and not get just frightened and shout back, but to invite a conversation about what's the deeper drivers of the antagonism. And we do have a lot of studies, More in Common, for example, is one of the institutions that are trying to see what is actually the opinion of the ones that are not shouting. Because we give so much attention, especially in the media, obviously, because they love it if people get antagonized. They love it if they fight because of news factors. But that means we have got the polarized voices as a minority in our society dominating what the political space is within which our governments can act. And to much more look at what is the majority saying that keeps more quiet. And there was a very encouraging study just last week that 68% of the Germans are now saying they actually feel confident that their democracy allows for them to weather crises. That's an up for 14% compared to pre-corona. That there is a willingness to collaborate and to work together. And so how do we strengthen that awareness, that attention, and kind of pull away the energy from the ones that are just making it very hard and very difficult because they're very loud and very drastic? And this is, for me, an integral part. How do we educate? And I think the framework is a massive step forward to really make sure it's not about just learning how to use and be very good users of digital technology and hardware, but a much more broader idea also, how do we use a technological revolution as part of societal change to really make us meet the sustainability goals we have. And at the same time, to also really train ourselves in dealing with the kind of conflicts that a dismantling of the old routines and old path dependencies is going to bring with it, because transformation times are very political times. They have a lot to do with fear of loss and a lot to do with seeking of identities that will allow for me to let go without feeling I'm at high risk. And this is for me something where I'm trying to understand right now what's the role of communication, of science communication, of media communication, and obviously of education, not only in schools, but whichever bit in society we are enabling people to become the stewards of that kind of transformation and feel courageous to speak out on what they've seen, courageous to go against what is still the kind of narrative or what needs to happen, and courageous to hold out a hand to say, I want to understand you, instead of just hating you, as we've got it now in social media, as a very, very worrying development. So those would be my views on what is resilience. It is really about a society to be able to renew itself and not to just buffer a shock by jumping back to, we're talking about building back. In the EU, we had a discussion about this. And then they sometimes add a better, so building back better, but it still makes us look to the past as the kind of ideas that we hold that should guide the future. So how do we build forward? I think this is why the work in the UNESCO on anticipation, on futures literacy, and all of that is really, really crucial to bring there as well. And this is what resilience is, that you react to a shock in jumping forward in a way that allows for stability of the functioning of the system under the changed circumstances you're in.
Okay. Okay. Thank you very much, Ms. Göpel, for the very rich remarks that touched upon many different issues, but also showed some reason for optimism and some reason for hope, for example, through people disconnecting well-being and consumption and not making that strong action anymore. We have a very few minutes left and wanted to just take the opportunity to make one more last quick round among the panelists, asking them to just make very, very short remark. And I wanted to ask, as we have most of our audience, of course, from the education community. It's either educators themselves, or it's people who are responsible for education systems or for part of the education system. And I think you have all showed a very clear and very compelling vision of where we would have to go, what would have to change. And I just wanted to briefly, and we really do have only a couple of minutes left before the interpreters before we have to cut also for the interpretation. I wanted to hear from you really, what would you recommend? What is the one thing that we would have to change in education in order to make sure that education more fully contributes to the vision that you have all laid out and to the positive trends that you have also laid out? And Ms. Satish, I could start with you asking really for very short remarks. Satish, you need to unmute your microphone.
Yes. Is it for me?
Yes.
Okay.
Please.
One thing I would like to see changing, our education for sustainability, to make education more than education of brain. Our teachers should see our students not just a brain, but whole body. So we need to learn to, like just now we heard, that we are dependent on cheap labor from Eastern Europe to come and produce food in Germany. Germans, British, French, Americans, everybody in the world need to learn to use their hands, grow food, build houses, make things, and give dignity to labor, dignity to manual work, dignity to hands. If we don't teach our young people to use their hands, only use their brain, and depend on imported labor from Eastern Europe or Turkey or Africa or somewhere far away, that is not going to be sustainable. So we need to change education and make education of head, but also education of heart and education of hands. That's the one change I would like to see.
Excellent. Thank you very much, Satish. The same question to Professor Zuhl, please. The one change in education. We can't hear you. We need to unmute.
Okay. I would like to echo Mr. Kumar. I think it's not just the hand and the brain, it's also the heart. I think for us, at least from our philosophical point of view, the complete human person is three-ish: the head, the hand, and also the heart. And I think the heart is perhaps what is now under threat when we talk about mental, what we call health, a question of emotional issues, the resilience that we talked about. Unless we have these coping facilities and been taught in a very formal way, then perhaps you also will be struggling to find our path forward. So I think these are issues, and these issues, Alexander, is not new. You go back to UNESCO, I always talked about this, the 4 pillars of learning. You talk about the learning to be, and it talks about the complete person. And UNESCO itself has not exerted enough to say that learning to be is one of the cardinal pillars that you need to put in, other than just learning to know and learning to do. And from learning to be, then we learn to live together. And now we are talking about learning to become. So unless we start to exert this on your members, then you will not go into the right path that we are taking. It is not something which is new, it's there, but we need to be very assertive on this. Thank you.
Excellent. Thank you very much, Zul. Katsucho, very brief remarks on this point, please.
Thank you. I basically agree with Mr. Kumar because I think that the learning with experience is really important. I was impressed that my class, that to analyze the substance of the rain. We analyze the pH and substance, and also that we realize that acid rain and relationship between the emission gas. So we change the lifestyle and choose a bicycle or on foot. I think that problem of Japanese young people is that the cognition of the climate change. They realize the mechanism of climate change, but they don't feel sense crisis of the climate change. So I think that the learning with experience will be helpful to realize the environmental problem more. Thank you.
Great. Thank you. Thank you very much, Katsutoshi. And Maya, your last comments on this point, please.
I think what is at stake in our societies that are over-consuming societies is dare to see. And then what follows from that. Because deprivilegization is something that people have not been good at in history.
Thank you very much for that last comment. Already, it was a very dense session. We're coming to the end already of our session. I thank very much the four speakers. I thank again also the German partners for co-organizing this seminar, which, as we said, is only the start of a series of a number of seminars. The next one taking place on the 14th of October. We have received many questions in the chat box. Some of them were around the question implementation, and we tried to say just at least a few words about it at the end. Many other rich questions came up. We will digest them, we will collect them, and we will try to address them as many of them as we can in the whole series of the webinars. With this, just again, thanks very much to the whole audience for participating in such large numbers. I thank very much the speakers, and I hope to stay in touch and see you soon. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Alexander.
Thank you.